Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It
Force.
is very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
And pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience. Welcome one, welcome all, welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Our producer for tonight is the great one himself, the maestro, Mr. Craig Gibson. We're coming to you live via Love 97 FM. This is Tuesday, the 21st day of October, 2025. And if it's a Tuesday, you know the deal. It's Maritime Tick, 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 Tick Matters. We encourage that if you're driving and tune in with us, please do so cautiously. And ensure to take your time in getting wherever it is you are trying to get safely. As the saying goes, drive to arrive alive. Our sponsors for tonight's show are 101 Pharmacy and also Island Care Pharmacy up there in Freeport for all your medication needs. Check out my little cuz, Shantia Healed McBride, and her lovely team at 101 Pharmacy in Nassau, and of course, Island Care Pharmacy in Freeport. We are secondly sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited. Yes, that's BMC. That's us. We provide a full slate of ISPS maritime security services. Good night to my Auntie May. Yeah, that's my Auntie May up there in Freeport. 92 years old and going strong. And of course, the number one fan of Maritime Matters. As she moves toward 93, she's growing even stronger. Stronger. And stronger. Tonight, we will revisit the big topic of global warming. We shall predominantly focus discussions surrounding the U.S. threat to countries voting yes on UN's net zero framework. And that's by way of IMO. So discussion surrounding this hot topic should include the following. Rubio and Duffy threaten IMO member states ahead of climate vote. You know, we talked about this last week. And we said that there are some major threats to any country that want to vote yes to the net zero framework legislation that once passed. All ships would be limited to the amount of carbon they release into the environment. And if they pass that threshold, they would be fined some $200 plus per ton that they actually put into the air. And all of that is to mitigate and to cause them to shy away from just getting those combustible engines that run off bunker C and cause them to move from there to basically natural gas. And even so, when they import, they could plug in so that they don't put any carbon into the environment, which will lend to them not actually passing that threshold. So there are some threat to countries that says yes, because as you know, President Trump and his regime have an issue with the world trying to move to renewable energy. Remember that saying, drill baby drill? Well, Mr. Trump is serious about that. The US has a lot of gas, a lot of oil, a lot of everything. And what's happening is everything pertaining, or most, at least 90% of products and everything pertaining to this global warming mitigation by means of renewable energy, those things are provided by China. All the solar panels, all the wind farm, the windmills, China is providing them to the world and making, or potentially going to make, a whole heap of money. And the U.S. as a country not providing those things, not making them locally. In fact, the U.S. is importing them as well. Mr. Trump is saying, look, y'all trying to hurt us. We ain't into that. If you all go ahead and support that, that means you all try to hurt us, and we could put all kind of things on y'all. And we'll talk about the details of those things that the U.S. would do to countries that vote yes. And we want to know what happened on Friday surrounding that vote of the net zero framework. Because, you know, Friday was the day it's supposed to happen. Did it happen? Well, we're going to find out when we return from our first break. Now, ship owners take steps to avoid the U.S. and Chinese port fees. When I say ship owners, what is in the international maritime news is because the U.S. had put that $1 million tariff on any Chinese-built ship or ship owned by Chinese coming to the U.S. ports. Chinese decided they're going to rebut, and they're saying that any U.S.-built ship or ship flagged by the U.S. coming into China would have to pay some $1.5 million per entry. So now these two big, huge, massive countries with most of the money in the world, because you know countries is even in the zone with the kind of monies these countries have, they are at war using trade with one another. Where does that leave us? Well, all we can do is sit and watch, eh? They're going to have a meeting, as you may have heard, sometime next month, where the two of them would get together and shake hands and have discussions. We have to watch and see how the chips fall as a result of that meeting. But right now, man, a lot of ruckus going on. And other countries are getting caught up in this. You remember what happened with tropical shipping? They built their vessels in China many years ago. And if the U.S. didn't give them some form of leverage, they actually give them a waiver because they were tropical shipping and they were very important to the Caribbean. They got a waiver that they don't have to pay this $1 million per entry. And that's the reason why tropical shipping is still in business. But a lot of companies are not going to be getting waivers. And they're now saying that Bahamian flag ships, you know, we got a lot of ships. We got over 1,500 ships carrying the Bahamas flag. What is being said as part of the backlash from the U.S., if the Bahamas was to vote yes on this net zero framework, all Bahamian flagged ships or Bahamian registered ships would have to pay a fine upon entering the U.S. And you know we can't handle that. That's not our problem. We don't own those ships. But they would be fleeing away from our flag and going to another flag that didn't vote because they want to continue to trade as they normally do without having to pay any extra levy that other ships wouldn't have to pay, eh? So what is the Bahamas' position on this voting on net zero framework? We're going to discuss all that. I ain't trying to jump the gun. I mean, those of you who know, you know. But those of you who don't know, just stay tuned. We will go through all the details as to what happened on Friday pertaining to that voting process at the IMO in London, pertaining to what committee was that? That's the Environmental Protection Committee, MEPC, Maritime Environmental Protection Committee. That big vote went off on Friday, and we need to know what happened. We want to discuss in a small detail, well, a little detail, how the vessels of Venezuela are being attacked by the military, by the U.S. Navy. They've been blown out of the water. And a series of them were blown out of the water, and the very latest one, there was a survivor. Well, who cares? but he survived. Is that going to continue? We don't know. But guess what? We will discuss it. And you guys who have the information more than me, and I got plenty of information on it, please feel free to call in while we do the discussion. We're going to talk about what ships are doing to meet that net zero framework that the IMO is lashing out at ships. So they have carbon capture systems on board. In other words, when the exhaust when the exhaust funnel let out the carbon, before it gets that far, it's going to be trapped and sent. It's going to be processed and sent into a tank on board for storage. And then later on, they would take that off and give it to an entity ashore who's going to buy it from them or who's going to charge them for it. And then they're going to actually further process and put it under the ground somewhere so it don't get in the environment. That's called carbon capture. And then they got fuel cells. Fuel cells meaning you got hydrogen fuel cells, etc., on board the ships in containers, and they can use that as energy because carbon don't emit any carbon. So again, that is a step toward them having a net zero ship. And cruise ships are moving toward it as well. They're actually putting wind propulsion on some of these cruise ships. You believe that? Wind propulsion. You know, back in the day when they had them big sailboats? Okay, so now they're going to put some sails on cruise ships and container ships and bulk carriers. I've seen they're already doing it. Just so that they can assist with wind power, the propulsion, in view of cutting down on the carbon emissions that ship makes. So please, we want you to stay tuned as we delve into discussions on those maritime issues. But at this very point, we got some guests in our studio. And our guests don't deal with net zero framework. Our guests are not dealing with what the U.S., what ships are doing to get into the U.S. and China without being fined or levy placed on them. They're not dealing with the Venezuelan drug boats. What are they dealing with? We got a local Bahamian tied in with an international company that is actually putting docks throughout the country. And what type of docks are they actually putting around the country? Floating docks. And if you want to know what floating dock is, you're going to find out tonight. So, with no further ado, I allow my guests to introduce themselves as we move into this floating docks installations around the Bahamas, etc., etc. Go right ahead, my brother.
All right. Well, man, I hope I can make docks sound exciting.
Oh, yeah, docks are very exciting. We can make it exciting tonight.
All right. Anyhow, my name is Chad Daly, and so yeah, I've been in the floating dock business now for quite a few years. We'll say it started in 2000. But prior to that, I've been in the marine industry where, as a family, you know, I don't want to talk about child labor too much, but I was probably 7, 8 years old.
Wow.
Painting and sanding down.
Oh, you did dry dock work?
Yeah, we're doing dry dock work and building boat cradles for large crafts. So that's where we started.
Stranger to the maritime operations.
I've been around for a long time.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So
how did you get into the floating dock stuff?
So floating docks. So that's a bit of a story, I guess. So as a family, it was my father who had started a business, and with his two brothers, and we began actually in the playground industry. So building commercial playground systems, much like you would see in water parks, like you would see at Atlantis, as an example. That would be one it's probably our product.
Yeah.
So
that's in Atlantis Marina? Are they floating docks?
No, at the hotel here, right in Nassau.
Yeah, they have a marina at the hotel.
Yep. Well,
is that where your docks? You actually install those docks?
I'm talking about the water slides and the
you mean the playground?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
So that's where we began.
Okay.
So in doing that in the manufacturing side, that's where we began to make polyethylene or plastic docks using the same materials that those things are made of.
Okay.
So after making some changes, this industry is significantly more fun.
Wonderful.
So we've stuck that out for 20 years.
So we got some of those equipment on some of our private cruise ship islands as well. You wasn't engaged in installing those, huh?
I personally was not involved, but I was involved through emails and transactions that
Okay.
way. I physically wasn't present, yes. But,
Right,
you know,
wonderful.
we've done some work with Royal Caribbean
Right.
on several
Coco Key.
islands.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, lots of projects over the last, 25 years, I guess it is now. So,
Yeah. Well, we're glad to have you, Chad, and we're happy that you tied in with a young Bahamian to basically lend your experience and hold his hand and pull him along the way so that he could be big time like you doing some of these docks and all the rest of that. So let's introduce our young Bahamian and see, this is a maritime show and this is a maritime marine construction. So I want the world to know that not only going to sea is maritime. Maritime is also doing marine construction things around the waters, docks in particular. Let's go ahead, introduce yourself, my brother.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jerero Maki. I am the current, Director of Business Development and National Sales.
Yeah.
Just got promoted, so it's kind of new to me. But yeah, that's my position in it right now, as of right now.
So how long were you involved in actually installing docks and that type of thing, these floating docks in particular?
Okay, as far as that concerned, I'm still learning along the way. Chad is still training me. I'm still in training, but as I'm dealing with sales as right now.
You're dealing with sales.
Right.
So what? I mean, I can talk to you a lot. I don't want to Chad too much because you could be here with us, Chad in and out, right? What really have you been doing from day one, even with sales? Obviously, if you're selling something, you got to know it. And if you're selling something, you got to know where they install it. Where have they been installing these floating docks in the Bahamas from that you involved with?
Okay, I was there. You familiar with the Antique floating bar?
Yeah, man. That's my boy Troy.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Troy's my dog. I used to go there to eat me some good conch salad, conch everything, conch fritters. But he do some good crack conch.
Yeah, the food good over there.
Yeah. I've watched him build that small floating dock.
Right.
Away from the Antique big vessel.
Right.
And I've been on it, and it's pretty steady.
Yeah, man.
I mean, throw a big party, and he invited me, and I went to that big party, and nobody fall overboard.
Right.
Everybody's on the floating dock. Right. So was that the first one you was involved with?
Yeah, actually, that's our first project right down there.
that's our first project in Nassau.
And Nassau, and that's the model that we use to show off. But we're
Yeah.
currently working on other projects.
Yeah.
So did you do any more other than that so far? Were you involved in any?
No, not as far as aside from Antique floating bar.
Right.
We're just checking out other sales, other projects that I'm trying to close right now. A lot of things trying to close.
So you had liberty to say anything that might be coming on stream soon as far as floating docks is concerned?
Floating docks as projects.
Yeah. As projects. I mean, as sales.
All right, as sales, yeah. But can I talk about the Family Island as well, or
Especially the Family Island. That's the main one we want to talk about.
Yeah, well, we have a.
I know he's a Cat Island man, eh?
Yes, sir.
We ain't starting with Cat Island though.
No, you don't start Cat Island.
Okay, let's start with Cat Island. Let's be biased. Let's be biased. Yeah.
Man, we have a few big projects over there. Not sure if you're familiar with Mr. Ezra Russell.
Yeah, man. Everybody know that name.
Okay, well then what we're doing. I'm currently working on.
That's New By Day.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Hey, you supposed to know your place.
Yeah. Yeah,
So you're doing some stuff in New By Day, building a marina or something?
Yeah, so between Ezra, my uncle Curly, I'm not sure if you know what
I know Curly very well.
Yeah, he has a brand new hotel and resort over there.
Yeah, I heard it's very nice.
Yeah.
So he's going to build a marina there as well.
Yes, sir.
So you got big things that go on in Cat Island coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you could get your hand wet on this one, or you just could sell, you just could do the sales part. You would actually be involved?
No, I'm actually going to be involved. Like I said, I'm in training. What I
Yeah.
don't know, I did my research and everything, but what I don't know already, Chad is training me.
Yeah, he doesn't have. At the end of the day, he doesn't have hands on yet.
So let me
he's
ask
a new
you,
young
Chad.
guy, as you said.
Yeah, he's a young Bahamian that's getting his feet wet. So let me ask you,
Sure.
is there any particular training that a Bahamian can do in the aspect of this type of dock construction and that type of thing in university, or even if they could do some certificate courses and that type of thing?
That's a fantastic question. I don't know the exact answer.
So how did you learn the stuff?
Me? Trial and error.
Trial and error?
Yeah, a lot
Wow.
of it.
Wow.
Talking with the right guys and
Yeah.
and the corporations that we've worked with, manufacturers.
Okay.
We have developed myself included, because I'm probably the oldest guy along with them, training programs that we would bring new dealers and distributors through the model that we work with, train them how to build the business for one, but how to actually install it correctly. So you can maintain a warranty.
Can you walk us through, let's say, the Antiki setup? Okay. From the time you put down the pilings to the type of material you use for the platform, and from start to finish, what have to happen?
Oof. Geez, without me documenting that, I'm gonna say. So basically, at the end of the day, we need to look at getting permitting done. That's really where we first start, to make sure that we're capable of being able to put a dock into that particular location. So that sometimes is a very time-consuming process and sometimes expensive. I know some of these projects. We run across that one, Jay. It's get that project done on CAT.
Yeah.
Some big money.
Yeah. Definitely.
Some of these others, not so bad.
And they are right. Yeah, man. Don't forget, we were supposed to mention.
Oh yeah, we gotta talk about this guy. This is the other project that we're working on, right?
Yeah, we have a few big projects, bro.
So it's we got LGM Maritime, the Academy here, right in town.
Dr. Richard.
Yeah, so we're looking at that particular project. So that's a school that's right here in Nassau. So we'll be building basically two big dock setups. One on we'll call it on the mainland, and one on the quay. So it'll give access for the students to run the boat straight back and forth until maybe it'd be the secondary method across there while that bridge gets worked on. At some point we'll get to that point. So as far as getting from point A to point B in these projects, permitting's probably the biggest thing that takes us the longest.
Okay, so once you get past the permitting,
and part of that is the environmental impact studies that come along with that.
Environmental impact assessment, we call it.
A lot of it, they're going to tell you what you cannot do.
But wouldn't the owner have to go ahead and do that part of it as far as getting the EIA approval?
No, not necessarily.
That's part of what you got to do.
We offer that as a service.
So
we'll work alongside the owner.
Okay.
Or the property
to assist them
owner.
in putting in for the EIA.
We'll help you with that paperwork, make sure it gets done. Because we recognize that those business owners, as an example, we're working with another bar here in the island. They're too busy. They're trying to run that business and keep it going. So
and they don't want to get too technical with this type of thing,
right? So that's not their expertise by any means, and we're good at paperwork on our end, and so we deal with that.
So do you find like floating docks more ideal for the Bahamas as opposed to the conventional wooden docks and whatnot? Because most of our marinas were basically wooden docks.
Yeah, I'm biased.
Well, you need to be biased, but
I've been doing floating docks since day one. I haven't,
How long ago was day one? I mean, how long ago were they around? Because I seen a very large floating dock at Resort World Bimini. I mean, it's huge. Okay. And they put it there for their mega ships or mega yachts. Right. It's supposed to be mega yacht marina. And they're very sturdy, very strong. I love them. Now, they were there for like 10, 12, probably 15 years. So how long ago was the beginning for you?
For us, in the manufacturing side, we've been going for 35 years.
Oh, that long?
Yeah.
Almost old as me.
And that's just, almost. Same with me.
Yes.
So we're, I'll call it the poly dock system. So
that's the polyethylene.
They're all made out of polyethylene. Okay. Different variations.
I know ropes I'm a seaman, so we deal with polyethylene and polyester ropes and that type of thing. When you use the term, I'm kind of understanding how it fits in.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we term those poly docks. Okay. So they're all polyethylene, or it's whether it's medium, high, low density, different styles of polyethylene.
Now you have the top section that you walk on, and then you have this big floating piece. How do you describe that? I don't know.
Floating billet usually is what.
So it's a floating billet. What's that made from? Is that the polyethylene stuff?
They're typically polyethylene as well.
Because they get a lot of what we call the thing, barnacles. Yeah. So how do you service them?
Send divers in.
You just scrape them off?
Yes, sir.
Just like so they just like a ship, because ships get barnacles.
Exactly the same thing.
But you take the ship out of the water though. How do you do that in the water?
Divers.
Yeah. So how long do they last before that barnacle start eating through?
Every location's can be slightly different. So I would say here, and watching some of the marinas that have been built here locally, I would say probably annually. We need to
That's
need
the
to be servicing
maintenance. But how long is it expected to last before it's no more good?
So
before water penetrates it?
Well, I'm going to say our poly docks, the brands that we do carry,
right,
65, 70 years.
Okay, so
lifespan on
it's
those.
Almost a lifetime. And then once they're gone, they could be repaired, taken out, gone on dry dock, or you got to basically replace them.
So we have the capacity to be able to do plastic welding. So that
really,
if we do get a puncture in it, which typically that only happens with somebody that doesn't know how to run a forklift.
Right.
It's usually not from damage.
Yeah, but from fair wear and tear after that 70 years, could it be refurbished? Well, it may be in reached it yet.
That's a great question. I'm not sure what it's going to look like at the end of the day.
Or how you could refurbish it based on whatever needs to be put back in place.
Yeah, so what we've done, so I've been doing this 25 years. So let's say we'll take a poly dock that's 25 years old. I can refurbish those. I'll clean those up with a pressure washer. We'll use an acid wash like you would use on the hull of a boat.
But the hull of a boat is not polyethylene.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's still the same product.
They could take the pressure from a pressure washer. Yeah. Okay.
So we'd use that hull cleaner like you'd use here, but we do it on land, so it's not going to affect the
environment,
marine life at all.
Wonderful.
Wash it off, and then we can put that straight back in. Now, let's say, for example, it starts to get kind of chalky looking. So the UV maybe was no good in a particular batch or brand that's out there. There is a process called flaming.
Okay, that's fire.
Yeah, so it's just like
fire.
You guys don't do it here, but let's say, well, we do it in Canada a lot and all throughout the U.S. We're shrink wrapping boats. So we take plastic and we'll cover the boat for the winter. So it's so we use a big torch, and we'll actually torch the plastic
onto the vessel. Let it stick.
Well, yeah, that's how that works when you're sealing a boat up. But on our poly docks, so let's say even your lawn furniture, for example, down here. I was sitting on a lawn chair today. It's green, and it turned to chalk. It's dusty looking.
Right.
Well, I can make that chair because it's made out of polyethylene, same product. I can take a torch like you'd use for plumbing fixtures. I'll hit that with a flame. I will make that shiny and bright again.
Oh yeah.
In seconds.
Okay.
Bring it right back to life. So what you're doing in that case is you're sealing or resealing the pores on that plastic, which have been broken apart by weather and sun and things hitting them.
The exposure,
Yeah. So you've probably seen that process. Not everybody has. Maybe in a stadium or stadium, like a soccer pitch or something, you'll see the seats. They're all faded out, and they can hit those with a torch, and they'll bring them right back.
Take them right back. Okay.
Nice bright blue.
That's interesting to know.
Is.
Yeah. So you can do that with these docks.
We can refurbish polyethylene docks in that manner.
Okay.
As far as repairing them, certainly we can plastic weld them. We take the same material and it runs through a spool just like you would with a MIG welder, running like stainless steel or aluminum wire through it to where you use plastic.
So this floating dock with that polyethylene is basically going worldwide. I mean, is this something that the world is utilizing? And yeah, is that you guys? Is that a worldwide favorite? I mean, for marinas.
I would say so. Yeah.
For marinas and private docks. Do you do private docks as well for behind somebody's house?
All the time. Yeah. So there's quite a few actually poly docks sitting around like Lyford Key.
People who get plenty of money. What about the poor people like us?
Well, I don't know.
Do you have any? How much does it cost compared to the wooden docks? Do you think it costs more or less or
that's a good
almost
question.
the same?
So it would depend on whether you're talking like a wooden on piles dock.
Yeah,
or wood,
pilings,
or wood with floats.
No, not the floating ones.
Yes, what I would say conventionally, if I'm building a pile dock with, 6x10 or whatever wood structure, probably end up being about the same price.
Oh, really? So that's not very expensive.
Yeah, because we're using less piles.
Okay.
Now that's probably the most expensive part of the
piles,
whole project.
Yeah. What the material that the piles is made out of? Steel or?
There's multiple things that you can use for that. So typically you're going to see wood. It'll be pressure treated timber, which is typically their spruce or pine.
So you would use wooden pilings with your polyethylene
we do. Yep.
docks?
Yeah.
Even the floating docks?
even floating docks.
Because the ones I saw, it may be wooden, but it don't look like wood.
What you've probably seen is a capping on the outside of those. So they
Over it.
will cap that with PVC, which again, it's a different type of plastic, and that is a smooth surface so that when your brackets and things that are riding up and down through tidal fluctuations and wave attenuation, it's not going to wear that pile out.
Yeah, because
so
the traditional wooden pilings seem to wear away quite fast. I mean, with the barnacles and everything, and they got to change them out I'm sure more than the 70 years or 60 years. They probably do it every 30 years.
Yeah, probably less.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say
well, that's good information,
10,
Brother Chad. Mr. Chad Daly. I see Gerald don't like to talk much. I know. He they got after mummy them. But let me just say, we thank you very much for this information, and we're going to move along with our more interesting topics, the ones that people want to hear and I guess call in on. I don't know why they didn't call you guys. I wish somebody called before you leave. But if you're free to stay, I welcome you to stay if you want to. We got another hour. You might not want to hear this type of stuff. But, I want to thank you before we move on for all that information. And I want to thank you for getting a local Bahamian involved in taking money your wings.
Yeah.
As far as, because, we always want Bahamians to have these opportunities.
And that, I would say, that's been my passion since day one.
Wonderful.
Is to be able to create jobs and empower other people. And that's been my philosophy. And I think that, that's probably been what our success has been, because we actually have a purpose.
Wonderful. So at this point, we'll go to another break, to our first break. We're talking maritime, people. You are listening to Maritime Matters.
At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart. At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection.
No credit, no problem. No cash, no problem. No radio, problem. Love 97 FM, the Bahamas hits and oldies station.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again.
Welcome back to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Our producer for the night, none other than the great Mr. Craig Gibson. You're listening to Maritime Matters, and on this show, we talk maritime. Maritime Matters is weekly, every week at 17:05. That's 5:05 p.m. every Tuesday here on Love 97 FM. The primary purpose of our show is to sensitize Bahamians of opportunities in the maritime sector. We also cover current maritime issues from the domestic and international maritime feeds. The phone number to call us, should you wish to get on this discussion during the show, is 326-8255. That's 326-8255. To hear a replay of the show or any of our previous shows, simply hit us up at any time via our YouTube page. That's Maritime Matters Bahamas. Just go to YouTube on your electronic device and type into the search box Maritime Matters Bahamas. So let's talk maritime. Again, our topics for tonight start with the threat to IMO member states ahead of the climate vote. And we go to the clip, or a clip, from the Maritime Executive feed. And I will go ahead and do some quick reading before we get into any discussion. And again, you could call at any time if you have any questions, any queries on any what's going on, so that we can get into the more nits and grits of it. And it reads as follows. The Trump administration is threatening to deploy some of its biggest legal penalties against countries that back the Marine Environment Protection Committee's draft CO2 emissions regulations. So that's the MEPC CO2 emissions regulations, which are up for a final vote on Friday. Now this is talking about before Friday. Promoting their activist-driven climate policies in the IMO net zero framework could result in sanctions, tariffs, port fees, or crew visa restrictions. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Secretary of Transportation Sean Duffy warned in a joint statement Friday. So this Friday morning, just before that vote was cast Friday evening, this is what they're saying to the entire IMO, which is represented by over 170 countries, right? In the administration's view, and this is the U.S. administration, in the administration's view, the framework amounts to a European-led neo-colonial export of global climate regulations. This dramatic framing might seem disproportionate to the size of the sector, which accounts for just 3% of global CO2 and barely flickered on U.S. policymakers' radar in years past. So in years past, the U.S. didn't check for what's going on with the carbon discharge of ships, because the carbon discharge of ships represented less than 3% of the emissions worldwide. So this ain't no big deal, right? The big deal is when you talk about vehicles, which represents up 28%. The big deal is when you talk about those infrastructure that supplies energy to big cities, right? In our case, like BPL. Is that a call? Is that a call, Mr. Producer? No? Okay, like BPL and those type of things, right? And so what they're saying here is the U.S. really didn't, up to this point, the U.S. really didn't pay much attention to what the IMO doing with the decarbonization from a worldwide perspective, from a shipping perspective in worldwide shipping. So, in the big picture though, it is not usually discussed as a tax. The new net zero framework will be the first and only global financial penalty of any kind for carbon emissions. If enacted, it would be a symbol of non-US opinion on climate change and a new goalpost for measuring every other industry's emissions. So what they're saying is, if this passes at the IMO, this will be the first time taxes are levied on ships based on beyond passing the threshold of the amount of carbon they emit into the environment. And they're saying that this may be small, but if it starts here, where will it end? Because they're saying that the U.S. opinion on climate change and a new goal post for measuring every other industry's emissions. In other words, they start taxing the ships. Who say they ain't get taxed for the vehicles? Who say they ain't get taxed for the infrastructures that deal with providing energy to cities and that type of thing? That's what's being said by Mr. Rubio in this case and Mr. Duffy. This would be the first time that a UN organization levies a global carbon tax on the world. Carbon tax now. The first time, if it happened. President Trump has made it clear that the United States will not accept any international environmental agreement that unduly or unfairly burdens the United States or harms the interests of the American people. That's what this boils down to. President Trump is saying, if y'all pass this, that gonna hurt us. So y'all who passed this, we can hurt y'all. And that's basically what he said. In a statement, Rubio and Duffy said that the administration unequivocally rejects the MEPC proposal and will not tolerate it. An estimated 10% hike in global shipping costs from the carbon fee structure is too much to bear, they warn, and could be disastrous. To penalize countries that vote for the IMO carbon tax system, Rubio and Duffy laid out a menu of options that could be brought to bear. And these include, listen carefully now, this is what the U.S. is going to levy on countries that vote yes. Sanctions on individual officials. In other words, officials of your country would individually be sanctioned by the U.S. Secondly, additional port fees on ships owned, operated, or flagged by countries supporting the net zero framework. So if your country supported that framework and your country owns ships or people who from your country own ships, then they're going to levy, they're going to give you some issues. They might even turn you away from coming into the US. If you flag a ship, this country voted yes, any ship carrying the Bahamas flag, and we have over 1,500 on them, they will be saying we're going to do we can levy some fines and that type of thing on you if you want to enter the U.S. waters, right? And ships that are operated by entities from countries that voted yes. So what they're saying is, we just sitting down and taking this. If you vote yes, that's a price to pay. And they go on to say investigations of anti-competitive practices and potential blocking of vessels from certain flag countries. So they're going to investigate and decipher whether your practices are anti-competitive with the US. And they will potentially block your vessels from entering the US. They go on to say visa restrictions on C1D maritime crew member visas. You know the C1D visa? That's we get B1, B2 visas because most of us go by plane and we go to visit and all the rest of that stuff. But the people who go in by ships, who work on ships and they got to go in there to do trade, these people got to get what you call C1D visa to enter the US. And you can't enter the US by plane on a C1D visa. Oh, let me take that back. You could enter on a C1D visa because most of them fly to join their ships, right? But you need that C1D visa to enter the U.S. on a ship as a port. When you enter port, the border control authorities want to see that C1D visa. Now, it doesn't mean that every crew member have to have it because many crew members don't have it. But when you don't have it, you're not allowed to go ashore. And the captain has to make sure you stay on that ship while you're in the U.S. port. Okay? So, but what they're saying is they're going to put restrictions on the C1D visa to crew members from countries that vote yes on this NZF net zero framework regulations. last but not least, they say commercial penalty is stemming from U.S. government contracts. If you are getting a U.S. government contract to do anything, they can tell you, boy, look here, your country vote yes and trying to hurt us. You can't be doing this project for us. We dealing with countries where they ain't trying to hurt us. So the U.S. see the voting on this IMO MEPC net zero framework as a tool that could hurt them, and if you vote yes, so it could move forward, then they're gonna lash out at you. And that's how President Trump roll. President Trump ain't try to allow you to cause his country to have some shortfalls when it comes to finances, and you get away with it. No, you fight back. And it goes on to say, and I quote, "We will fight hard to protect our economic interests by imposing costs on countries if they support the net zero framework. Our fellow IMO members should be on notice." And that's what was said Friday morning. And of course, the IMO would have been aware of that. The United Nations would have been aware of that, etc., etc., etc. So what do you think happened? As a result of that going out, what you think really happened at the IMO during this voting process? I'll go on and tell you. We don't need to delay this. I'll go on and tell you. Again, when you look at the clip from the Maritime Executive, it says, "At the end of what may have been one of the most contentious weeks in the history of the IMO, International Maritime Organization, the member states voted to adjourn discussions for 1 year on the net zero framework." You see what they did? They pushed this voting process back a whole year. Why? All because the U.S. authorities, starting with the president, and I just read you what Mr. Rubio and Mr. Duffy had to say, which supports the president. Countries couldn't vote their conscience. And I heard a lot of talk, even today, as to whether the Bahamas is a sovereign nation and could do whatever and vote however it feels. You know what? Anybody saying that is totally out of touch with reality. Because while the Bahamas is a sovereign nation and do have a vote and can vote freely at the IMO MEPC or IMO any session at the IMO 7, because we attend all of them, right? And we're part of IMO. We, just like the other 170 countries, we can move what you want, and we've been doing that all along. But we vote in the interest of our ships. We are number 1 in the world with cruise ships. And in that regard, cruise ships have all of them use the USA. The USA have the largest cruise ship home ports in the world. So you can imagine if we were to say yes, because we're big on climate change activation. We are main activists for climate change and decarbonization and all the rest of that, global warming to reduce it. When it comes to being general views of the Bahamas. But if the US was to send out a threat that any country voting to support any legislation internationally at the IMO, at the UN, or at the ILO, whatever, and we be brazen enough to say, boy, we sovereign country, ain't checking with the US, and we go vote yes. And the US levy all those things on us. When we find out our children can't go to college no more because the visas was cancelled, no more I-20, no more that, because the US decide, the Bahamas voted for this thing that we have a problem with that's going to affect us. We're not going to allow Bahamians to come here and go to our universities. We're not going to be giving Bahamians 10-year visas. We give them a visa, one entry only, and they'll have to pay that $300 or $400 or $500 every time they apply for another one. And we even ain't gonna let much of them go through. They're officials, they can cancel the visas. They ain't coming to the US for no conferences and this and that and the next, because we have a problem with them. And all because we decide we can vote our conscience, we're a sovereign country, we can't let those big giants cause us to vote how they want. Oh, how foolish is that? Is that what we want? Could we sustain that? No, we can't. So when our government last week decided, and it was said by Minister Fred Mitchell, Minister of Foreign Affairs, and of course it had to be a cabinet conclusion, because these ministers don't make international decisions on their own. They go to the cabinet and the cabinet decide this is the way we can go with this is the way we can go with this. When they said that the Bahamas is poised to sustain or abstain is the proper term. Abstain. That, in other words, we're not going to say yes and we're not going to say no. We can stay on the fence, right? Because we know we want to say yes, but we also know that if we say yes, we can be sanctioned by the US. Now Cuba might be able to take that, and with difficulty. But can the Bahamas take sanctioning by the US? Can we afford to lose all the cruise ships and many other tankers and not of our flag? Could we afford for our children to lose their visas when they go into university? Could we afford for the US to stop any ship from coming in that is Bahamian flag or Bahamian owned? Bahamian owned boats that go to Florida to bring in freight, like the mail boat and suppose they can't go to Florida no more. Where are they going to leave us? See, we just say things, but we need to understand that decisions come with repercussions when it comes to international issues. When you get a country like the United States, which we are totally dependent upon to survive, sending out warnings, we have to take heed. I mean, we don't have to. We can be stupid about it. But any administration and government that has anything to do with any United Nations international legislation, and the US says, if you do this, we could be after you. We have to leave it alone. So let's get that thought out of our head, saying that we shouldn't allow certain situations to influence us to not do what we want to do, because that is not being in touch with reality. 326-8255. That's the number to call. If you disagree, that's the number to call. If you agree, that's the number to call. If you just want to have something to say about this situation where the IMO, the actual body which represents the United Nations, decided to put the voting off for a whole year, because they know that countries are going to shy away from voting yes after the US put out a threat to any country that votes yes. And you can say, if you desire or if you wish, that in situations like this, the US is stronger than the United Nations. Certainly stronger than the IMO. That's just the way it is. And I read on. At the end of what may have been one of the most contentious weeks in the history of the IMO, the member states voted to adjourn discussions for 1 year on a net zero framework, which was designed to create a global standard for shipping decarbonization. The IMO emphasized that work would continue to create census, and in the interim, amendments to MARPOL, that's the Maritime Pollution Convention, would proceed. But the news drew wide condemnation and criticism of the IMO, with a few, namely the United States, celebrating the vote as a win. Of course, the US said we win that one. They put it off. They know we don't tell them what we can do, so we ain't gonna worry about that no more. So we ain't gonna worry about ships getting fined if they emit more than that threshold that the IMO have for carbon going in the air, right? The net zero framework had been formulated in April of 2025 after an equally contentious session, but in the end, won the support from 63 member states to move it forward. Now remember now, if 63 say move it forward, you have to have less than that said, no, we don't want it moved forward. And then you have a whole handful who probably abstain, right? This thing, this serious stuff. And this ain't just that. This ain't just that. So shipping was recognized as the first industry to propose a global approach to decarbonization. Why you think the IMO won't be ahead of all the other UN entities when it comes to decarbonization in the world? We only represent 3%. Why we got to be the first? And that's a good question. Why shipping got to be why international maritime got to be the first to say we got to levy some taxes if you go beyond the threshold with emitting carbon into the environment? Now we know carbon being emitted into the environment destabilizes the weather patterns. We know that it creates a barrier that traps the heat on Earth. And these are proven scientific situations, right? We've had discussions on these in some of the previous shows. So we know that if it continues this way, we're going to have more hurricanes like Dorian and even worse. We can have more flooding. We can have more unstable. I mean, look at the last couple of weeks in the Bahamas, man. We had rain every other day, or if not every day. That's totally unprecedented in my lifetime. So, again, because of global warming, we are having these issues. Anyway, the framework would have also created the first global carbon pricing mechanism for any industry. It would also have provided clarity for an industry that needs uniformity and a global approach to regulation. Right? The IMO's leaders had admitted that more work needed to be done to complete the framework. In other words, they wasn't sure when they put that framework in place that you would have enough alternative energy or alternative sources of energy to say ships to remain below the threshold, right? So they had some concern. However, going into this week, they were still confident that the support existed. Normally, the IMO seeks to make agreements by consensus and avoids giving any appearance of disunity by carrying measures only with thin majorities. So this one was thin, right? The IMO normally have overwhelming support for things that they bring to the table. And this is probably the reason why they decided it don't make no sense voting on this one, because we can have so much people abstain because very few countries would vote yes. Now the countries who prepared to vote no, and we can name them for you, that's the oil-rich countries, those countries would have voted no, and then that legislation would have been killed because the no's would have won. And that means it wouldn't happen. But what the IMO did instead, they said, look, we can postpone this. We don't see we can't win after what the US threatened. So let's put this off for a year or so. And in that year, it should be hoped that some other industries, like ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, that deals with all the airports and all the planes, and are they going to put thresholds for the planes when it comes to decarbonization? They got entities that deal with the entities like BPL and other entities that deal with energy distribution within cities and countries. Are they going to put a restriction on them so that if they emit over a threshold, they're going to be fined a tax that has to go into the IMO coffers? And that tax would be used to fight against or assist in enhancing other areas that need financial assistance in combating climate, in combating carbon emissions. So where are we going with this? That's the question. So while the net zero framework is far from perfect, adopting it would have been an important step to deliver on the IMO's commitment and send key signals to an industry that was not only asking for a global framework, but actively supported this deal. During the session, many national delegates reserved their positions, perhaps nervous after President Donald Trump posted the day before the vote that he was bitterly opposed to what he described as this global green new scam tax on shipping. Listen what President Trump called it. It's a global green new scam tax on shipping, and the creation of a green new scam bureaucracy to spend money on green dreams. President Trump is, I don't know if I want to repeat that, right? He said it's a global green new scam tax on shipping and the creation of a green new scam bureaucracy to spend money on green dreams. President Trump said it's a hoax. He said it's a hoax. And many countries in the world don't agree with that. Many Americans don't agree with that. But that's the position of the number one man in the U.S. The most powerful man in the world. It's a hoax. And they prepared to lash out their power if countries don't fall in line with that being a hoax at this point. So behind the scenes, the United States threatened in the run-up to the meeting of imposed tariffs and port taxes to counteract the measure, regarding it as a threat to consumers and to the competitiveness of the United States merchant fleet that Trump is seeking to bolster. Other nations, and these are the nations now that supported this thing, Other nations, including Saudi Arabia, how big they are with oil exports and carbon emissions as a result of selling that oil, proposed amendments while there were growing reports of bullying and undiplomatic efforts. So of course, you will have countries that are against this move to push renewable energy. And it's all because they're going to lose so much money. You can imagine if the world don't need oil no more. And the only thing Saudi Arabia really make money off is selling oil and oil products. So does Iran. So does Qatar. And most of those countries in the Persian Gulf. Venezuela. They got a lot of money to lose if this comes off. So of course, they'll be back in the USA. Attempts to change delegates' minds continued throughout the morning today, October 17th. October 17th, that's when this was Friday, at the committee session and over lunchtime. So they waited until the last minute to cast a vote. Made it clear to those supporting adoption of the net zero framework the risk they would not win a vote with sufficient authority. So the IMO realized after this threat and all this pushing, they were not likely to get a yes vote on this, and they would lose out. And once the no vote wins, then that have to go away. Right? Within the IMO, plenary votes can be overturned if states representing more than 50% of registered tonnage subsequently object in writing. Yeah, but hey, you could do that afterwards, right? At the IMO Secretariat's suggestion, the meeting then took a vote and adopted a proposal to adjourn the question for 1 year, with many countries that had not declared their position voting in favor of the postponement. The final vote was 57 countries in favor of the delay and 49 against the delay. So of course, you have out of the full gambit of countries making up the IMO, 170 plus, You had 57 and 49, 110, 108 voted. The others abstained. And out of those who voted, more countries voted to put it off a year. Well, of course, if you vote to put it off a year, you ain't saying yes, eh? Than those who saying, no, we ain't gonna put it off, because they know if they had voted, the nays would have won. In the run-up to the above vote, the United States, Russia, and the UAE, Liberia, and Saudi Arabia were amongst those opposed to the adoption of the framework. So they were going to vote no. China, the European Union, Brazil, and the United Kingdom were open in favor. Why would China be in favor? Well, we know China can make all the money off the renewable energy, the renewable source, the items that you got to use for renewable energy, eh? The European Union, well, they don't make oil, so they're really trying to push for oil. They rather get and we said last week that for the first time in history, solar was the number one source of energy worldwide. So even though the shipping thing is not passed, solar has still taken over as the number one source of energy worldwide. And that's going to continue for a while. And it's going to get better and better and better. Just like the electric vehicles are soon going to take over the internal combustible engines. And it's going to get better and better and better. It's going to be similar to when you had laptops first came out, eh? What happened when laptops first? This costed like $4,000 for a laptop. And then they gone down to like $2,000 after about a year. Then they gone down to $1,000 after a year. Now you can get a laptop for $300-400. Well, maybe not the best, but the same level of laptop you was getting when it first started and cost $4,000. Same thing as certain TVs. See, you remember videos? Well, they're gone now. But the price of these things keep dropping as technology develops and get better and cheaper. So the price for electric vehicle is now almost equal to the price of a regular vehicle, except you don't have to pay for gas no more. When you plug in once a week, you, of course, that's going to go in your electrical bill, but it's still going to be far cheaper than if you was buying gas. So we got to understand this climate, this renewable energy thing and the reduction of emission of carbon is happening already. Whether the United States want it to happen or not, it's going to happen. And a year from now, the United States may not even care about that vote. So I think the IMO made the right decision. Because you don't need countries being harassed or being lashed after because they decided they want to vote for climate change. In the run-up to the vote, the United States, Russia, and the Arab Emirates, Liberia, and Saudi Arabia were amongst those opposed to the adoption of the framework. China, the European Union, Brazil, and the United Kingdom were openly in favor. But Cyprus, Greece, and Malta threatened to break the European 27-strong bloc vote by voting against or abstaining. So Cyprus, Greece, and Malta, they big flags, just like the Bahamas. But they wanted to break some things at the 27-strong bloc vote, and they're going to abstain. Well, of course, the spread was big enough too, so if only them did that, it wouldn't have been a problem, eh? The view is that whereas a failure to secure support for measure would be its death sentence. So if you didn't get a support for something, legislation that you put out, then they're dead. You can't bring that back no more. Because if it passed, it's dead, and you can't go back to voting again, eh? So the IMO ain't fool. They know they want that to happen, so they put it off for a year, because if it did right now with those threats, it wouldn't pass. The nature of the debate at the extraordinary session suggests that those supporting the measure will now seek to modify it in order to win stronger support in 1 year's time. They may regard securing an adjournment as a victory, given there was a strong possibility that if the framework had been put to a vote, it would have been defeated. Those opposed to the framework appeared keener to kill it than to see it modified. And they tried. So the IMO Secretary General, the big cheese, who had been confident of the adoption, was largely silent after the vote. He better be silent. Now, he might have been confident, But boy, that was getting killed. He said it would take time to regroup. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, however, called it another huge win. And Trump win again. While the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Mike Waltz, posted a message on social media saying that with the U.S. leadership, they had prevented a massive UN tax hike. So they a massive tax hike by the United Nations worldwide. As far as the U.S. concerned, we did a good thing. And I mean, it is what it is. So do we go on with that? No, we ain't go on with that no further. We think we have brought that to the attention well enough for all of us to know that what happened on Friday by postponing that vote by a year, putting it off for a year, was the best thing to do in everybody's interest. That's my view. 326-8225 would be the number to call if you have a different view. So that is what happened to the IMO's net zero framework vote last Friday. And we're going to move on to ship owners taking steps to avoid U.S. and Chinese port fees. What these ship owners are doing now to not have to pay those big chunks of money when they go into the U.S. $1 million a time if your ship is built by China, or if it have ownership of Chinese, or if it is registered by China. You will pay that big buck. And the Chinese reciprocated by saying, you will pay big bucks if your ship is owned by the U.S., flagged by the U.S., operated by the U.S., and they come into the Chinese port. We're going to levy some big bucks on them. So we're going to discuss that when we return from our break, along with some other one or two little stuff, like that Venezuelan boat strike that happened this week, where one survivor came through. So with that, we're going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Payne. We will return shortly.
At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart. At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection.
Off the CD player, to the console, into the transmitter, out of the tower, through your speakers, through your ears. Nothing but hits.
Love 97.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Maritime Matters. Again, I am your host, Captain Glenn Payne. The number to call, 326-8255, if you want to run this discussion. So far, we've been talking about some serious little stuff. We've been talking about the Secretary to the U.S., Mr. Marco Rubio and Mr. Duffy, how they threaten IMO member states ahead of that climate vote on Friday, that thus causing that vote session to be put off by a whole year by the MEPC, the Maritime or Marine Environmental Protection Committee at the IMO, and saving face with everybody, because the U.S. now don't have to lash out at other countries, and other countries don't have to be the victims of being lashed out at when it comes to measures ships have to take to not be taxed or not be fined if they pass the threshold that is set by the IMO for carbon emission. And that's what happened on Friday. Now we want to talk about the steps that some ship owners are taking to avoid the United States and Chinese port fees. Because you see, as you know, in recent times, the U.S. put out a serious levy on ships that are built, operated, or flagged by China. And I'm going to follow again from the Maritime Executive a clipping on this topic where they explain all of what's going on. And again, if you want in on this, 326-8255, feel free to call in or just listen to me talk with the people I'm saying, right? Ship owners are starting to reveal some of the steps that are being taken to avoid the port fees instituted by the U.S. and China this week. Now remember, just came into force this week, targeting ships built, ships owned, or ships operated by companies in the respective countries. The steps come as the industry also flagged the uncertainties and continues to seek guidance from the respective authorities on how elements, especially ownership, will be interpreted. In other words, some ships have multiple owners. Is there a certain percentage of non-American ownership or a certain percentage of Chinese ownership that will be levied if those ships go in? You have all kind of shareholders and companies that own ships. That's what they're saying. How will you interpret this ship is owned by Americans when it go to China, or this ship is owned by Chinese when it go to America? There had been reports that some of the large companies were considering structural changes to their corporations or their fleets, while many of the carriers were reported to be redeploying ships across routes. While the issue of where a vessel was built is definitive, you can know where the vessel was built, that's facts. You can look at the continuous synopsis record and see where that vessel was built. You can look at one of the vessel certificates and see where that vessel is built. How a ship is owned and managed is less specific. And now owners appear to be moving to take advantage of some of the opportunities. Pacific Basin Shipping is a big company that has with over 246 ships. I mean large ships now, big ships going around the world. This company, Pacific Basin Shipping, is one of the largest operators in the dry bulk fleet. Now when we say dry bulk, what are we talking about? We're talking about ships that carry commodities in bulk like sand and salt and rocks and coffee grains and anything that is dry, don't have to be refrigerated. This is one of the big players, Pacific Basin Shipping. So they detail a series of proactive steps in its areas of control that it is taking to mitigate its exposure. And when I say mitigate its exposure, what they're saying is they don't want to be exposed by who the owners are for these ships. Because if that is exposed and some of them are Americans, then when the ship go to China say, oh, you got some American ownership in this, we can levy this tax. Or when they go to America and they got some Chinese owners, shareholders, oh, you got some Chinese, we can levy. So what they doing is they trying to mitigate the exposure. It starts with expanding its Singapore company and moving strategic leadership to Singapore from the company's traditional headquarters in Hong Kong. Remember Hong Kong and China. So they moved their headquarters from Hong Kong. Now Hong Kong have a lot of British owners too now, because remember that British just turned that over to the Chinese recently. I mean in the grand scale of things. When I say recently, I mean in the past couple of years, right? Not decades, yes. So they want to move their headquarters from Hong Kong so that the U.S. don't think since its headquarters in Hong Kong, they have Chinese ownership, right? So they move it to Singapore, which is like a mutual country. It notes that it used the retirement of a board member and appointment of a new board member to also mitigate the applicability of the USTR 301 Annex 1. Now, when they say USTR, it's the United States Trade, whatever the R mean. This the rules or the law that came into force that the U.S. put in place that all Chinese owned ship or ships of Chinese ownership have to pay that $1 million to enter. All right. So the company reports it. So what they did actually, in essence, was they changed one of the owners, who I presume was Chinese, and got another owner who might have even been American, because they don't want no Chinese affiliation when their ships go to the U.S., right? They don't want to have that tax levied on them. The company reports it has already transferred several of its 107 owned ships to the Singapore registry. So, and the plan to move about half its ship to that flag. So they were flagged under China. Now they move registry from China to Singapore. And that's what I was telling you. Those cruise ships would move off our flag so fast, if you fly up in the face of America, that we would not have a flag no more. Right? We'll be down to less than probably 100 ships, because we got a lot of cruise ships, but we got a lot of tankers and all the rest. And then they all want to be able to go into the U.S. Without having a problem with the flag. And so what they did further, it says going forward, only ships owned or chartered through its operations in Singapore will be deployed on voyages calling at U.S. ports. So they're not going to send any ship to U.S. ports that have Chinese affiliation, because they know what can happen. They got to pay $1 million every time they enter. So they can split their ships and only send a set that don't have no Chinese affiliation to the U.S. Commenting on market conditions in the dry bulk sector, it notes a rally and says the sector is firm. In other words, things have picked up. However, it expects the tariffs will add to existing disruption and untimely contribution to high freight rates and volatility. It believes that some market participants have started self-sanctioning, meaning that some owners are keeping ships outside of the U.S. and some charters are preferring non-Chinese vessels. So it already having an effect, eh? Pacific Basin says it has also sought further clarification from the USTR, that's the regulation that say they got to pay this money, on the 25% ownership rule. So it says that if you have 25% Chinese ownership, you got to pay. It notes that as a public company, its shares are held broadly, and while it does not have a controlling shareholder, so ain't nobody have a majority shares as a controlling shareholder, it cannot know the nationality of each shareholder. Well, is that true? We don't know. I'm sure they could find that out, right? The issue is emerging as a broader uncertainty for the publicly trading companies. Global Ship Lease, a Greece-based owner and lessor of container ships, issued a similar statement on October 15. It declares that it is not owned, operated, or controlled by any U.S. enterprise, while highlighting that it received limited information on its individual shareholders, most of whom hold their shares via brokers or managers. So they're saying you can't even find out the name of these people, because they have managers and brokers who name going down as who they are. Public companies only have details on major shareholders and institutional investment managers. Global Ship declares that it does not believe it has 25% or more direct or indirect ownership in the U.S., and that its company is located in Greece and is owned and controlled by Greek citizens. So they're saying when these ships go to China, American have no ownership in them, right? That's all they're saying. Other owners were also believed to taking steps to mitigate their exposure to the fees. So what they doing in essence, because we ain't got time to finish all this, right? But what they doing in essence is they taking measures to avoid getting fined by either China or the US. And the measures they're taking is they're making sure the ships they're sending to the US don't have no Chinese affiliation, and the ships they're sending to China doesn't have any US affiliations. And that's how they're going to roll with this thing to ensure that they can continue their business. Again, that is what they are doing, the ship owners are doing to avoid these port fees when they go to either China or the and most ships go to China or the US because they're the two biggest trading markets in the world. So it's hard to avoid that. So ladies and gentlemen, we're not going to reach other topics tonight, unfortunately, but it is what it is. We have gone through quite a bit. Obviously, we got no calls. Obviously, our show was highly technical, as intended. We were just putting information out there so that the regular Bahamian can understand what's going on in international shipping right now. And those are the big topics. So next week, that one when we talk about the drug boats getting blown up off Venezuela, we'll bring that up next week as we move along again with some more climate change situations. We talk about the carbon capture situations that ship can use, the fuel cells that they can use, the wind propulsion that they can use to enhance the ability to move toward net zero when they're sailing. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, I say to you, thank you very much for listening and continuing to listen to Maritime Matters. I say good night to my good old Auntie May, who's our number one fan up there in Freeport, 92 years old and going strong. I say thank you to our sponsors, Bahamas Maritime Connection, 101 Pharmacy, and of course, Island Care Pharmacy. I say thank you to our good producer, Mr. Craig Gibson. And with that, as always, we say to you good night as Maritime Matters. Tick, 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 tick. Out.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in, then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. I've had nothing to live for, look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide